Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to Paranormal Axetivities with your host, Ben Axe. Today's episode is super lined up. I am super pumped for our guest here. In just a few minutes, I'll be talking to Ellie, whose family recently purchased a property over in the UK called Hickleton Hall. And Hickleton Hall is very old, very historic, with a lot of interesting, neat stories on its own right. And then you throw in the paranormal side, and it's just a fascinating place. So I can't wait to bring on Ellie to talk about the stories that they are discovering as they renovate the property. But before that, the sun is coming out, the temperatures are rising, and it's a perfect time to talk about away travel. And it just so happens that this episode is presented by Away Travel, which is quite simply, Away makes everything you need for a trip away. Away started with the perfect suitcase, then built from there, creating a range of travel standards developed from the travel stories of friends and seatmates. The pieces aren't smart, they're thoughtful, with features that solve real travel problems. To give the whole world access to better travel standards, Away took the direct-to-consumer approach to lower prices, and the quality is guaranteed. Your Away suitcase will be with you for life, and we are teaming up with Away and Podgo to give you the best deal on premium luggage by going to podgo.co/away. That's podgo.co/away. Away Travel, here to make your journey seamless. All right, guys. Like I already mentioned, we have Ellie coming up in just a few minutes, but we have one more thing to get to before that, which is this week's Paranormal Axetivity of the Week. And this isn't even mine. Well, it is mine. I heard it and I was here for it and I cleaned it up. But it's not directly because of me, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if any of these actually are. But, so yeah, this week's Paranormal Activity of the Week, man, it happened this past weekend on Saturday. Danae, my wife, if you have listened to previous episodes, you've heard her on a couple. But she was out with her old high school friend, and they don't see each other all that often. So it was a big thing when they got together. They hung out all day. They went to a party down in Cincinnati, like a Alice in Wonderland-like thing, if that matters to you. But anyway, again, it's her high school friend, and Danae has a high school boyfriend who had passed away recently. I'm not sure how long ago he died, but I would say at this point, probably around a year. A year, maybe a little less. But he died, I'm pretty sure he died in 2020. I don't know if it was post or pre-COVID, but right around a year. So anyway, during that time, her and her friend from high school, they hung out, they had fun, and they talked about him because they both knew him, and it's just, how high school friends are. You get together and talk about the old times, the old stuff. So that happened, and then she got home, her friend left, and then her and I was still up here. I was actually podcasting that day. I was doing a different show, Beers with the Buzz. Check it out over at thebuzz.com. So, we were doing stuff. And then as I'm up here cleaning up, I hear a big, it sounds like a gunshot from up here, but I just hear a big, bang. I'm like, what the fuck is that? So I yelled, what was that? And she was like, honey, come down here. So I go down there, and I had a glass bottle, water, what do you call it? A water that has carbonation in it. What's that called? Carbonated water, I guess is the right way to put that. Yeah, so I just had a carbureted bottle of water in the refrigerator. And what Danae says was right after her friend leave, they got done talking about this guy who had passed away. She had reached for the refrigerator door. And as she reached for the door, the bottle exploded. So, if the bottle would have exploded 2 seconds later, it probably would have shattered her with glass. Because, I cleaned that glass up and there was glass everywhere. As you can imagine, a big glass bottle exploding in such a small space. And then that timing is crazy. And I have bottles in there all of the time. I have beer in there pretty regularly. And then I also have that carbonated water in there because I like it. So I have it in there constantly. And I have never, in the 2.5 years that I've lived here, had any kind of bottled anything freeze and blow up. I will admit that we have had some things kind of get icy and slushy in there because it does get a little cold sometimes, especially the stuff that's in the back. But I've never had anything completely freeze or explode. and just the timing of her hanging out with her high school friend all day, talking about her ex who had died recently, and then as soon as she reached for the refrigerator, it exploded. It was pretty crazy, and it was super loud. And yeah, it could be just a coincidence, but the timing, in my opinion, definitely is more than just coincidental. So take that with what you will, but that is this week's paranormal activity of the week. It's been pretty quiet overall. I think I skipped last week when it comes to the show, and I don't think anything really happened last week, not other than just oh shit, something did happen. I was going to tell you guys this last week, and I didn't have time to finish up. But yeah, so I did have a weird dream. I'm not going to call this an activity of the week because it's not a ghost experience. I was sleeping. Like I've had talked about in the past and stuff, but man, I had a dream not too long ago. On the last episode, I talked about a dream where I could see the guy standing next to me. This was just like that. The same scenario happened, except this time it wasn't a guy. It was like a hairy being, and I reached and I could feel him. And that's all I got. I'm pretty sure I didn't tell you this dream already. I'm pretty sure this happened after my last episode. So if I'm repeating it, I apologize as I'm thinking about it, and I'm kind of getting nervous that I already told you. I don't remember if I did or not. But yeah, so if you haven't heard it or, whatever. But so I woke up and I saw a hairy, Bigfoot looking being, but he was like a black, more like an ape or gorilla, but like standing like a human, just like staring at me really close. And I remember reaching out and I could feel like the hair on his legs. Like I reached out to make sure that he wasn't really there, but he was. I could feel him in my hand. And I was like, what the fuck? And then he turned and walked away, and that was it. But yeah, man, that was a dream that I had last week, and I can still feel it in my hand. It was nuts. But that could have just been a dream. It wasn't sleep paralysis. As I mentioned before, I can tell the difference. So it may have just been a really weird, vivid dream that I had. Who knows? But that's my weekly stories here. So let's get to the good stuff. So, as I mentioned, we have Ellie from the Hickleton Hall. So let's get her on. Ellie, how are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out on Paranormal Activities today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. And so I know that you, or if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but your family just recently purchased Hickleton Hall, which is over in South Yorkshire, England. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. Yes.
All right. I did some research on Hickleton Hall, and I've found that anything that was built in the 1700s is going to have a lot of history and a lot of stories. So I'm really excited for you to be here to tell us some of them stories firsthand.
Yeah, it would be good. Do you want to hear about the history, or is there anything you want to know?
Yep, absolutely. Let's start from the beginning. So, when did your family purchase Hickleton Hall?
It was in January last year. My dad became the owner of Hickleton.
Oh, very cool, very cool. And what was, like, out of curiosity, like, why did he buy it? Like, what's the intention on the future of the building?
Well, my dad's into quite historic buildings with quite a lot of past. I mean, he's always loved converting old houses and halls into quite amazing buildings. That's his job, and he's really good at it. So I think he's always had a real interest for it. So that's his plans for Hickleton, really.
Oh, that's awesome. And did he know about the haunted history going in?
I think when he was looking around, I think he found out a bit more about it. But yeah, I think so, yeah.
Oh, good deal. And then, this for everyone listening, if they haven't heard of Hickleton Hall, do you know like the history of it, or what can you tell us about the history?
It is a landmark building near Doncaster in Yorkshire, England. It has been unoccupied for 9 years. It was built by a famous architect called James Payne, who was employed to build Hickleton Hall in 1745. It was built for a banker called Geoffrey Wentworth. It became the home to a Chancellor of Exchequer, Charles Wood. It was used by the army during the First and Second World War. and it was also passed down in the family of Lord Halifax and then became the home to him. So that's a little bit about the history.
And that's a pretty incredible long history. And there are two things there that really, I guess, hit my sixth sense or whatever when it comes to paranormal. One has a lot of family history from generation to generation. And then you mentioned 2 world wars. And I feel like those things combined is just like it's how paranormal events are created. That's the perfect recipe, I think, is family history and war. So
yeah, it has a lot of history. I think the more you look into it, it could go on for hours. Like, this is just a very brief sort of part of its history. There's so much more to it that I think people don't know, but you'd have to really dig into it to find out all of its history.
Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I mean, dating back to the 1700s, I mean, that's just a long time. I'm here, I live in America, and we just don't have buildings like that. Like, I live in Ohio, and we just don't have that many buildings that are that old, or that we have historic buildings, but I can't say that they're that old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I before I forget, I do have to ask. I was looking at the Facebook page earlier at Hickleton Hall on Facebook, and I saw that you found a pig on the property.
Oh, yeah. They had recently found a pig in the grounds of Hickleton Hall.
See, that to me sounds like a horror movie. Like, I'm thinking you're exploring a property, and then there's just farm life hanging out. That's you know what I mean?
I know. Yeah. They found a pig on the grounds. So
I like pigs. So I like that story. All right. So you said your family purchased it a little over a year ago, and so. What can you tell me about your personal experiences at the hall? Have you actually experienced paranormal activity there, or have you heard other stories?
I mean, there's so many different stories from my personal preference and other people's that I've heard. I mean, I've not really had any that are massive myself. I mean, I've seen stuff that have been a bit odd and are a bit unexplained, and I've heard things. And there's actually, I'm not sure if you've seen on our pages, but there's this hallway, and it's just honestly has the most negative energy, and it's just has a horrible feel to it. And there's been a lot of stuff that has been spotted down that hallway by people that actually watch my videos. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's really creepy down there.
I did come across that, and I was actually going to ask you about that hall, so I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, you mentioned negative energy, and on past episodes of the show, I've talked a lot about energy, because I'm a very firm believer in paranormal energy, and then your gut feeling. You can tell if there's something positive or negative. And just looking at that hallway, I got a weird that's not right. So do you know what that hallway, what was that part of the building was used for by chance, or any history of that particular part of the building?
Well, that hallway actually does lead to a room on the left, which was actually a room with a haunted cross in it. It's about, I think it's about 6 feet, and it kept getting turned upside down on its own. So it's a very big cross, and it's actually in one of the videos as well. It was me walking down that hallway and into that room. But when I walked into the room, there was a massive bang. So I've sort of had an experience with that. But yeah, that hallway does actually lead to a haunted room with the upside down cross in it, which is sort of connected.
Wow, that would terrify me.
It is quite horrible.
I can believe that. I can honestly say I've had a lot of experiences and that kind of stuff, but I've never dealt with anything quite that sinister, I believe. So that just sounds terrifying coming from an eyewitness.
Yeah, it is.
And what else have we seen around the property? And you guys, what's your day-to-day like on the property with your family?
I mean, I'm not usually up there day to day, but when I do go up there, it is usually just the feeling of that negative energy in certain areas of the building, or just sort of spotting things that don't look quite right. It's just the sort of normality of it, really.
Oh yeah, that would be fair. Have you ever gone on any ghost hunts, or just kind of explore?
Well, we actually do usually look through the tunnel, which is actually connected to the world wars. So obviously in another video that I did, walking through the tunnel, that is, I think it's about a mile long. But yeah, that's something that we explore quite a lot. And at the end of it, we're actually trying to get through it because it has been purposely collapsed by someone, I guess, at the end of the wall. So that's something we try and explore quite a lot because it's quite a creepy space and area in the cellar. So
I believe that. What do you mean it keeps collapsing?
Well, no, when the war was over, we think that at the end of it, well, not at the end of it, but sort of halfway through it, the ceiling has been collapsed to stop anyone from getting through and seeing what's at the end of it. So we're currently trying to explore it and see what we can find in there. So it's quite unknown.
Just as like a historian, that sounds like an epic thing to see. That's like I'm really into like, that is like I'm really into the World War history myself, and that would just be something I would love outside of the paranormal aspect. That'd be a really cool thing to have the opportunity to do.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy, but it's quite fascinating at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. So one question for you: before your family purchased the Hickleton Hall, did you believe in anything paranormal, or did you have any paranormal experiences before that property?
I've never really had any paranormal experiences before the property, but I guess I could always say I'm a big believer in paranormal and spirits and unknown activity, I guess. I've always loved that stuff.
Oh, fair enough. Yep, I was the same way. I was the kind of guy, I was like a hesitant believer until I started back. I always kind of had like small experiences, but just enough that you could explain away. Then I had one big incident where I'm like, oh, it's definitely a thing now. So
yeah.
Absolutely. So if you can tell me what were some of the early stories or early experiences that you've had at the house?
Well, this isn't with me personally, but we have had a story where two workers were obviously working at the hall at the time, trying to work. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. I'm just really nervous.
Oh, you're fine.
No, we had two workers on the site at the time, and they were working in a room upstairs, I think somewhere, and they heard three solid knocks on the door, and they opened the door, and no one was there, and it was just them on the site at the time. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was quite creepy.
That's very creepy. So they heard three knocks.
Yeah, on the door that they were working in.
That's crazy. I say that because, well, one, that's obviously that happens. Like there's stories of that. And when I first started this podcast last year, on my 4th episode, I did it in my garage at the time. And as I was recording, I heard three knocks on my wall there's nothing to explain where they came from. So it's interesting when I hear stories that I've had very similar experiences with, and that's definitely one of them.
Yeah. I mean, as well, we've had people that have come on site and they've sort of gone down to that hallway area and they've come back up and they've said, look, we can't return to the hall. It just doesn't feel right. So we've had people come onto site and then just say that they won't return because it didn't feel right. And there's like some sort of negative energy there and they don't like it. So they refuse to come back.
Oh, wow. And what kind of what were they doing there? Like, were they just like workers for the building or?
I'm not quite sure who they were, but I've been told that people have refused to come back to the site because of how it feels.
That is really like right out of a horror movie. It's hard to argue with what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then I have to ask, I think I already asked it once, but so like, what's the future goal for the Hickleton Hall? Because I read earlier how they wanted to make it into like apartments or something, and that fell through. What's the future of the hall?
Well, the main hall, my father actually wants to bring it back into a stately home, so have the hall as a big home, and then on the north wing into separate houses. That's the plan for it.
Oh, awesome! And does that like I'm sure it would, but does that include like renovations and like changing like how the building would look on the inside?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, Absolutely. And I just asked that because, one thing that I've learned, talking to people who have paranormal experiences and stuff like that, is I heard that renovating a building can really stir up the paranormal activity that exists in the home.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is that something that you think that you've been experiencing, or your family and the people working on the building have experienced?
Yeah, there has definitely been negative stuff there while workers and people have been doing things there. We've actually had a medium on the site, and they've said they've seen spirits in the hall. And apparently there was one bad spirit and there was one good spirit, but the bad spirit apparently had really bad intentions. So.
Did she say what those intentions were by chance?
No, she didn't say.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, that would honestly scare me. Do you guys currently, or anybody on the property, like, I don't want to ask too many personal questions, I guess, but like, do you get people staying overnight there and stuff like that?
Yeah, we have workers that stay there, obviously, because it's quite far away. But yeah, we have workers that stay there.
And do they, out of curiosity, do they report any kind of like paranormal experiences overnight?
I'm not too sure on that. I'll have to get back to you on that, but I've heard anything on it.
No problem. And that's like, nighttime is always when it seems to be the most activity, but that's not always the case. I've had a lot of cases during the day as well. So what are some other stories that have happened, or some other experiences that have happened at the hall, if you can recall?
I mean, sightings of figures that we've caught in photos and our videos, obviously. I mean, I've seen a few sort of, when I go around there and explore and look in all the rooms, I've seen a few figures out the corner of my eye, and it just, usually you see like something out the corner of your eye and you just think, oh, it's just something on the wall, or you just sort of don't really think about it again. But I've definitely looked to the left or the right, and at the corner of my eye, I've always seen something that just doesn't look quite right. So there's always an uneasy feeling when you're walking around the hall, and you always seem to catch something at the corner of your eye. It's a really weird feeling. It's quite uneasy.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, just like imagining that terrifies me.
Yeah.
And watching the videos that you've posted on your Facebook page, again at Hickleton Hall on Facebook, it's a very creepy old building. But it's also at the same time a beautiful building. Like, just the structure looks amazing.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it looks really, really neat. I would love, if I ever do make it across the sea, I'll definitely be sure to visit Hickleton Hall if I ever have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, again, out of curiosity, because I know it's a very big property, outside of the building itself, are there any paranormal experiences or stories that happened like on just the grounds of the building and not necessarily inside?
Well, again, there have been things spotted actually on the outside. In the trees and stuff, like behind the trees, there have been figures, and actually one of the followers pointed it out to me, and they just said, look, we've seen this figure behind the tree. And I looked closely, and there was like this black shadow behind the tree, and that was in one of the photos that I'd taken, and I hadn't even realized. So yeah, definitely.
See, I think that's even scarier than the stuff that's on the inside, because I feel like if you're inside, you have a place to go, which is outside. But if you're outside, Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have been anyone else, because it was only me and one other person on site. And there's security everywhere, so no one else could have been in there. So it would have been impossible. Yep, absolutely. That sounds pretty terrifying. And then, just from the feelings that you get, I know you mentioned the medium once she saw a good and a bad spirit, or presence, I should say. What kind of spirits do you think, or do you feel that are there? Like, do you feel like it's anybody from a previous generation owner, like a family member, or anybody from the war? Like, what do you think or personally believe that is there?
I think I get quite a strong feeling of people from war. I think that had a lot to do with the history of Hickleton Hall. And I think it was actually used, I don't know if you know this, but it was actually used by Winston Churchill. He went there quite a lot of times. So I think it has quite a close connection to war. and I think people, I think it was used for soldiers who had shell shock. So I think it has quite a close connection with war, definitely.
Yep, absolutely. I would definitely believe that. Actually, I did not see that Churchill was there, so that's another incredible fact with that building. And one thing I
Yeah.
did see that from 1961 to 2012, it was called the Sue Ryder Home, and it was the care for terminally ill, and then also, if I can pronounce this word correctly, neurological conditions. And so, like with that fact alone, with care for the terminally ill, I feel like that would also be kind of a paranormal beacon, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah. I had another guest on the show not too long ago who actually lives not far from where that is in in South Yorkshire. He said he lived in West Yorkshire, I believe, but his mom or parents currently live in a house that used to be like a hospice home or something along those lines. And there's all kinds of paranormal activity. So I'd imagine if it was the same kind of idea for care of the terminally ill, it'd be the same idea, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's just a lot of history in one building. World War I, World War II, terminally ill.
I know.
I
know, it's crazy. It actually used to be a girls' school in the 1960s too. I mean, it's just so much information. It would take hours and hours to just talk about the history alone. There's just so much behind it all.
Oh, absolutely. And this is kind of off topic, I guess, but I'm just curious on what your opinion is, because I will seriously stay up at night thinking of this question. And I think Hickleton Hall is a perfect example of a building that's so old, that has so much history, like we already mentioned, wars and other things. If there's a ghost there, it's probably more than one, right? With all of the history that's there. Can they see each other? Can they interact? Like, that's just a question that I have that we can't really answer. But like, what's your opinion on that fact or that question?
So do you mean what I believe, like if they can see each other or if there's more than one spirit? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, ma'am. Like, you mentioned earlier the medium could see two spirits or two entities. Do you think that the entities here know that each other, and know that other entities are there as well?
Yes, I do believe that. I believe they all sort of connect with each other in some way, whether they're different generations or they've always, I think the connection that they would have would be obviously the hall, because I definitely believe that there are more than 100 spirits there. I mean, it's been around for over like 300 years. There's definitely got to be more than one in there. Absolutely. And I definitely think they all have some sort of connection, whether that's a hall or not. But I think, yes, I think they are aware of each other, and I think it's all connected, definitely.
I would absolutely agree with that. It's just something that we can never really, I guess, prove right now, I guess. But like, I mean, how would they not? I mean, like you mentioned, they are definitely connected by just the building, the hall itself. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I just, out of curiosity, how often or how much time do you think you spend at Hickleton right now, like on like a monthly basis or whatever?
I definitely go there I don't know, a few times a week.
See, and that's a lot of time.
Yeah, it's quite far.
It sounds like a really interesting place, and there's just so much history. I can't even fathom this. Watching those videos that I've only seen a couple. Honestly, I haven't gone back and watched everything that you've posted, but I'm envious of that opportunity to just explore a building of that stature, and two of that much paranormal activity, because there's just nonstop. I gotta believe it's nonstop.
Yeah, definitely. Have you seen the video of the skull that was discovered? I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I did, right before I hopped on here, I was looking at it, and I didn't get to watch it. I saw the headline and I saw like the thumbnail, but I have not yet watched it. What is that about?
Well, basically there was a skull discovered under the chapel, which is basically a room in the hall. And and there was in the chapel. There's a big wooden, not a sculpture, but it's a sort of like a big wall thing. There used to be a massive cross in it. Anyway, I don't know if it has some sort of connection. It got taken down before we actually bought the building. But under that, there was a skull, a real human head skull, discovered under one of the tiles in the chapel.
That is terrifying.
I know. So we buried it because we didn't want to disrupt anything. So we just put it back.
That's a good call. I would probably do the exact same thing. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was actually the worker that discovered it. It wasn't us. But...
Oh, right. And you have to think, like, that kind of brings up more questions. Do you know or have an estimate of how many people have actually died on the premises?
No idea.
I mean, it's got to be a lot.
Probably over 10, probably hundreds.
I mean,
considering how old the building is.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, just even being involved in the wars and then being a care for terminally ill, you'd imagine, I would probably guess hundreds of 300 years. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And so are you nervous that you might find more skulls around the premises while you remodel?
I definitely think we'll come across more things when we remodel the site. There's no doubt about it, considering, like you said, how old the building is. I'm not sure, though. I mean, that's the only real thing that we've dug up, because obviously finding the human skull isn't like on the normal day-to-day thing you'd find, is it?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, that would terrify me. I have to admit, I honestly don't think I've ever seen a human skull, so that would definitely send shivers, I think.
Yeah, it's very scary.
All right, absolutely. So is there any other experience or story that you want to share while we wrap it up here?
Not that I can think of. Not really. No, just apart from the sightings and the skull and the tunnel and hearing and seeing things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure, you know, walking through there, I know like a common thing that is seen in places like that, they call them like shadow people, to where there's like low energy spirits. And that's kind of what you explained earlier when you were seeing things out the corner of your eye. That's kind of what it reminds me of, are just like shadow people, which is like low energy entities, basically. Mm-hmm. That would be, if I went to a, here in America, we have an asylum called Waverly Hills, not too far from where I live. And it's an old building kind of like that. And I saw a lot of shadow people, like you described the exact same thing. So that's probably what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's quite scary when you see it in person. Like, because obviously in real life it's so different seeing it on the screen. It's just the most scary thing ever.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen them or not, but there's only been one show, where I guess there's 2 seasons now of the same show, that actually captures the same kind of feeling of seeing a ghost or a spirit or entity while you're watching it. And that's just my personal opinion, but it's The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And that show, for somehow, or they get it just right, in my opinion, on how they really catch your feels.
Yeah, I've been told to watch that. Apparently it's really good.
It is. And actually, season 2 takes place in the UK. I don't know where. And it's in a house, kind of like Hickleton Hall, honestly. It kind of reminds me of that. It's just about a family who lives in a very old mansion-like property. And that show, for whatever reason, it just gets it right with the feelings. Like you just mentioned, how the movies don't do it right. But that show, in my opinion, at least it catches the feelings.
Yeah.
All right, Ellie. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Before I let you go here, tell me and tell the audience how we can find you on social media.
Well, our Instagram is Hickleton Hall 1. Our Facebook is Hickleton Hall. Our Twitter is Hall Hickleton, and our TikTok is Hickleton Hall.
Awesome. So everybody, be sure to go to all the social medias, and I know Facebook, at least for sure, has a bunch of videos. How often do you post videos on there?
I don't manage the Facebook. I do the TikTok and Twitter.
Oh, fair enough.
So, yeah.
I just started TikTok, and I'm honestly not that good at it. So I'm gonna have to like message you on tips on how to use TikTok because I have no idea.
Okay.
But everybody be sure to check out all the social medias. And again, this will all be listed in the show description as well. So be sure to check out the show description and follow Ellie on all of the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. All right, Ellie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the Hickleton Hall. It's a fascinating building.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hope anytime. I hope to have you maybe sometime I can have you back and hear more stories from the hall as you guys renovate.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You have a great night, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, and again, a huge thanks to Ellie for taking the time and hanging out with me today to talk about the Hickleton Hall and all of the discoveries they're making while they renovate the property. That's one of those places that if I ever have the opportunity to go to the UK, I would love to visit it. I mean, just for the historics alone. And then the paranormal stuff obviously is just incredible. So I can't wait to hear more about it. And be sure, guys, to follow all of Ellie's social medias for the Hickleton Hall on Twitter, Hall Hickleton, Facebook, just Hickleton Hall. She's also available on TikTok. Be sure to watch all their awesome videos from all the discoveries that they just continue to keep finding as they renovate the property. And, I do love a small world moment. And a guy that I work with at The Buzz, you know him as Alex Benison, who is the host of the Armchair Wrestling podcast. He just coincidentally happens to live around 25 minutes from the Hickleton Hall. He said he has never been inside, but has driven past it many times. And I just love it when, the small world comes together. I've known him or talked to him for just about a year now, and he just happens to live right by the place I just talked about on a different podcast. So pretty interesting, pretty fun stuff. So again, guys, follow Hickleton Hall's social medias so you can keep up with what's going on over at the Hickleton Hall. All right, that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Hope you all enjoyed the show. I do have one quick announcement, as I am doing a live podcast, a live episode of Paranormal Axetivities this coming Monday night, which is which is March 8th. I will be doing a live episode with UFOologist Bruce Zen Benefiel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know if I am or not, but hopefully I did. But he's a UFOologist. He has been around for a long time, has multiple books. He's been on multiple shows. He used to have his own TV show, talking about aliens and UFOs and that kind of stuff. I am really excited to talk to him and have him on the show. So next, if I remember correctly, March 8th, and I believe we established it at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I could be mistaken, or it may be switched around depending on our schedules. But as of right now, that is the preliminary date and time. Be sure to follow my social medias on Twitter and Facebook, and that way you'll know for sure and stay up to date with that. But that's going to be a fun, exciting episode. All right, guys, that's all I have. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias as well, along with the buzzes. And I hope you all enjoyed the episode. And let's just keep learning about the paranormal together.